Hello, everyone. Welcome into Above My Pay Grade. My name is Eric. If anybody's watching, let me know if you can hear me. I'm double checking that the audio is good to go. I think it is. Wanted to cover a couple stories tonight and see if anybody joins the chat here at the end, and then we'll go through your questions. I was thinking to myself, when I was younger, I used to think uh, that people in the West were somehow different. They had ideals that maybe that wouldn't allow them to become some Pol Pot or Mao or Hitler. We were somehow different, and I'm not so sure about that anymore. To be honest with you, um, I wanted to show you this story from Canada, and it's kind of a sad story. If you guys follow me on Instagram, my handle is ampgrade, AMP grade. And I had this commercial on there where this woman talks about the benefits of euthanasia. And this woman in the commercial, you can see her here. Um, she talks about in the commercial, I see my family, I see butterflies and peaceful things and yada yada. But it turns out that this woman was trying to get treatment and was not able to get it, which is why she chose medically assisted suicide. And we're going down a very, I think most of you would agree, we're going down a very dark road where the government actually assists in suicide, especially with government healthcare, because they do it as a potentially a money saving venture. Okay, so here in this article from the National Post says last week CTV confirmed that Hatch, the woman in the commercial, was the same woman who had spoken to them in June about her failed attempts to find proper treatment for Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, a rare and painful condition in which patients suffer from excessively fragile skin and connective tissues. I feel like I'm falling through the cracks, she said. So if I'm not able to access healthcare, then am I able to access death care? She asked. And that's what led me to look into MAID, Hatch told CTV in June under a pseudonym. So she didn't want to die. She didn't want this. Um, and she chose it because of lack of access to healthcare. And we can get into a whole discussion about that, but it's for a different time. But um, further reading here, it says, however, BC was quick to approve Hatch's application for MAID after she had tried to access healthcare. There were no other treatment recommendations or interventions that were suitable to the patient's need or her financial constraints. Absolutely sad that we've got to this point, and it's interesting. You see a guy like Justin Trudeau, who's always he comes across as this nice, cordial person, and he's done some pretty authoritarian, gross things that, and this is one of them, where Canada is assisting in suicide. And I've read into um, Canada proposing uh, for child assisted suicide as well. What? It's utterly unbelievable and very sad. And the reason I talk about this stuff, I mostly focus on macroeconomics, but politics, unfortunately, and society has a lot to do with what's going on in the world today, especially macroeconomics. And a lot of people, a lot of young people have lost hope through COVID, and they can't always pin the tail on the donkey as to why that is, but um, I think a lot of it has to do with government overreach and people working and working harder for fewer dollars, The American dream is dead. It's just kind of sad. There's another article here I wanted to share that this one's a little bit more comical. But it's about California. So California recently had a budget surplus. And if you recall, they handed out some stimmies, and those stimmies were to help with inflation. But now they have a deficit, and I love the federal system where states can go bankrupt. Problem is, the federal government is a piggy bank for a lot of states, unfortunately. So if you have a state like California who hands out money like candy, uh, if they run into an issue with, say, their state pension fund, who's there to bail them out? The government, the federal government, who has the money printer. So, long story short, California's finance department went from a budget surplus to a budget deficit. And the reason that is because our economy is doing so well, according to Democrats. But it's really because capital gains tax in California. That added to their surplus, and now they're in a deficit. It says here in the article, but the report released by a nonpartisan legislative analysis office forecasts the state could be faced with a nearly $25 billion budget problem. An estimate, they say, is the weakest revenue performance in California has seen since 2008 Great Recession. Okay, so all bad news. But what do we know about government? If money dries up, they just print more, spend more, yada, yada, yada. So, what is California proposing? If you haven't seen this, this is absolutely hilarious. California, a state who never owned, or a state that never had slavery, is proposing reparations of $223,000. I'm not going to get into the politics of this, but I want you to think, what would happen in a state, in the state's real estate market? Because that's what they're going after here. They're saying, hey, home ownership in the African American community is way less than whites, Hispanics, potentially Asians here in California, and we want to close that gap. Sounds similar to college loans, if you remember that. But what do you think is going to happen to home prices if California starts implementing these reparations? Yeah, they'll go up, probably dramatically. And that's not to mention the rampant fraud that they'll probably see with this program. It says here in the Business Insider article, special task force created by Governor Gavin Newsom has put forth a groundbreaking proposal that aims to level the playing field for California's black residents. A team of experts recommend that each Californian who is a descendant of free or enslaved African Americans living in the United States prior to the end of the 19th century will be provided $223,200 in reparations. I came up with that number because that's the disparity between wealth of black Americans and white Americans. So it says here the reparations proposal could help black Californians obtain home ownership. I'm going to go with no on that one. It won't. And the reason I say that, and again, I'm not going to get into politics of it, but what do you think is going to happen to home prices? And then what happens to home prices? They go up. And then what happens to the other things that are attached to a home, like property tax? Those go up as well. And so people will buy a home, maybe, with this money. And then, yeah, they probably won't be able to afford it, get foreclosed on, yada, yada, yada. All right, guys, let's get into your comments here. My all-time favorite, Princess Consuelo Banana Hammock. Yes, it is satanic, this euthanasia. I wrote a paper on this um, in college about uh, government and government euthanizing people, even voluntary, of course. And it gets into a moral conundrum of sorts because people have the right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. So you might theorize that they could um, end their life if they wanted to. Obviously, they could do it on their own. But my point is, when the government starts getting involved with medical assisted suicide in a world of government controlled healthcare, you guys don't think that would be dark? It would be dark. And um, who puts the brakes on these people? Like people like a lot. A lot of people, I think, naively assume that somehow a politician or a leader has a moral code. Who's to say they do? Like who? Like if everyone said whatever you want, you're king for a day. It's the pushback that stops these people. But oftentimes, I don't think there's any breaks. Right? Um, at heart, these people are authoritarian, and I don't think they have a moral code. Oftentimes, their moral code is what gives them more power and control. Yeah, I agree. What the Canadian government's doing is pretty gross. Although I did read today, I don't know if it's true, that a judge um, waived all charges for the Canadian trucker protest, which I think is awesome. Um, the duplicitous nature of Trudeau. I did a video on this where he's talking about freedom of speech and freedom to protest in China. Um, the irony was lost on them. There's a special place in hell for Justin Trudeau. Yeah, oftentimes people think the bad guy's going to show up with a pitchfork and horns on, or um, he's going to look like somebody you think is not a good guy, right? Like the 20th century authoritarian types. But oftentimes it's sold with a smile, which is insidious and gross. Uh, Man, that's very sad. Um, you know, I'm a I'm a believer. I'm a Christian, and I think when you end your life, um, you're taking matters into your own hands, even if it's with medically assisted suicide. That you don't leave room for um, a medical breakthrough, a miracle, what have you. And I believe in those; those can happen. But on top of the fact that they're selling medical assisted suicide, I was watching George Gammon talk about this as some kind of heroic act. Like if you see that commercial, if you go to my Instagram, you could see it. Amp grade. Uh, it's selling it like it's some kind of there's heroism involved. Like, hey, this person chose the noble path, and to think that that wouldn't catch on like transgenderism has caught on. In many ways, transgenderism is a social phenomenon more than anything else. Um, yeah, it's it's sick. All the other states be like, well, if you want to, wink, wink, and great migration begins. Yeah, with California, that's what they're referring to. California wants to do reparations. You gotta think, where's the money going to come from? There's so many logistical challenges to this, and when you don't have a money printer, those logistics become very difficult because you have a profit and loss statement. You cannot just print money. Federal government can, but California cannot. Jay Black, what's up? Good evening. Thanks for joining me. How moral is the military? What about discipline? I saw a Twitter video on some lower rank service women lose their shit in command, did nothing. If this was at an award ceremony, I think I know what you're talking about. Okay, my experience, and if you guys didn't know, I'm in the military. None of this is from the DoD or Department of the Air Force. I always have to say that, but um, I've been in for 15 years. The military as a whole, like the people that I work with and have worked with, are really good people, freedom loving uh, Americans. Now, um, there's been a drastic change the last 2 years when it comes to morality, and I'm just talking personal opinion here. I felt like the people in charge at the military chose politics over their soldiers when it came to the vaccine mandate. Now they're rescinding that, yada, yada, yada. But I was kind of like waiting for the facts. I'm aware that I'm kind of the property of the US government and I have to follow orders. But there was a certain amount of, they were pissing on your leg, telling you it was raining with, hey, it's for safety, it's for readiness, but your natural immunity, we don't take that into account. Like none of that actually made sense to me. And when you ask questions, it was always shut up and Keller. So, long story short, to answer your question, there's a lot of people in the military who are moral, but when they're forced to choose between their job and, so let's say, obeying an unlawful order, like what makes it unlawful? And that becomes very gray because you assume in the military you have to follow the orders, but you assume they're lawful. And that's where it gets real, real dicey. So, I think a lot of the people, at least in my experience, are really good. Once you get into upper ranks, that can change. Is there a filter system? You kind of have to be a yes man to get up to those ranks to some degree. But one thing I always remind people of is in the Nuremberg trials, they said we were just following orders, and the the Jews, Americans, all the people on the Allies side said you had a moral responsibility to not follow those orders. And so we're not anywhere close to that. But my point is, you start at A and you eventually get to Z if you never stop progressing along those authoritarian lines. Uh, we are the carbon they want to reduce. A lot of people don't know that yet. Um, and then another thing, how did what's his name, Macintosh dude or Windows dude? How did he become a infectious disease specialist? He sells a bunch of computers, and all of a sudden we need to listen to him on infectious diseases and yada yada yada. Blows my mind, but here we are. They're also accidentally doing it in Canada for depressives. I assume you're talking about MAID, medically assisted suicide. Um, it's very dark. It's extremely dark, and when you don't have a moral compass, when you don't have anything outside, really, if you ask these people, if death, why is life better than death? That's ultimately what you should ask somebody, and a lot of people don't have an answer for that. I do. I'm a Christian, but I think it becomes death becomes this like we're saving you, we're helping you, we're not hurting you, we're helping you. It's really really gross. What's my crypto background understanding? Well, in the grand scheme of things, it's very little compared to some of the experts, but I have a decent understanding of Bitcoin. And if you guys want me to do a video on that, let me know. I'm happy to do that. But I look at crypto. If you've followed the FTX scandal and yada yada, you kind of understand there's two big differences between Bitcoin and crypto or anything they put on the blockchain. Um, and one is decentralized, the others are not. And so essentially, they're issuing tokens that are fugazi just to make money, and there's a lot of fraud going on. But Bitcoin, in my humble opinion, is the best hope we have to be outside the authoritarian system when it comes to finances. Even gold. Um, Gold has this a lot of good properties, but the one negative to gold is how do you buy a cup of coffee with it? You have to centralize it to some degree, and that's why we eventually went to paper because it was a lot easier to transport. Yada yada yada. Um, and if you don't understand Bitcoin at all, I recommend reading the book The Bitcoin Standard. It's really really good. And I always start with telling people to rhetorically ask themselves, "What is money?" And when they start going down that rabbit hole, they realize Bitcoin could be a solution. It could be. It's not 100%, but um, so yeah. If you have any other questions on crypto, I, I wouldn't call myself an expert, but I know a thing or two. The vaccine. Look up immune thrombocytopenia. Big word. I'm enlisted in the military, so. Uh, Son can't wait to get back to wrestling season in the next month, hopefully. Huh. I assume that's a complication. Um, we all saw what was going on during COVID. Like one of the craziest things, speaking of sports, I remember watching and seeing pictures of kids. You got to play, basketball with a mask on, and they'd all just hang it around their chin. But if they didn't have it around their chin, they'd get in trouble. What? Like collectively, we lost our minds. Um, and a lot of you I know didn't, but it's crazy. It was crazy to see things that didn't pass the giggle check. Um, so it's really wild. What's up, electrical prepper? Sorry, I was asking about morale. Oh, did I misread that? I believe most service members are righteous, though that is changing. Yes, I agree with that. Morale is in the toilet. If you go on any, like Tasking Purpose or Reddit or um, follow anybody that has a military channel on YouTube and just look at the comments. One of the propositions from a video I did earlier today, uh, the CBO came out with all these propositions like how can we cut costs, how can we decrease the budget, yada yada yada. Uh, they probably know already, but it's too late, right? But one of their propositions was to cut military housing allowance to 80%, to 80% of what it is today. So it would cover 80% of housing costs. Now, I'm not one of those people that thinks the military makes nothing, but it does. We don't make a ton per se, and housing has been one of those things that has really affected morale. And the reason being, one thing that's unique with the military is a lot of people can build equity, buy a home, put down roots. It's very hard to do that in the military because you're forced to move. And so you pick up your family, you go to a new base, you try to get on base housing. There's a year-long wait, and your allowance for housing only covers in the last 2 years because of the insane housing market and the bureaucratic nature of raising housing allowance. You go look off base, and everything near the base is beyond your housing allowance, which you can spend out of pocket for that if you so choose. But most people, go to a less desirable part of town, potentially dangerous, and then they have to drive an hour to work with gas prices. You see how this kind of escalates. Um, is there a solution to that? I don't think so. I think the military will always be, priority. It's becoming a more big of a priority because they can't recruit. No one wants to join. But unless it's a recruiting problem, why would they care about pay? They wouldn't. But morale's in the toilet. Like I expounded on earlier, a lot of people feel like they were betrayed. And when you're in a profession where you have to follow people's orders and you fall under a different set of rules and different set of standards, um, it's really hard to see when your leadership doesn't care about you. Healthcare forced us against our will as well to take the vaccine. Watching people cry as they got the shot, it's sick, isn't it? And the one thing I would always tell people, like America's population is not very anti-vax. Because if you look at like the smallpox vaccine and the flu vaccine, like a lot, 95% or so of Americans are uh, understand what a vaccine is. It's not that crazy. But why was this vaccine so questionable to a lot of people? And the answer is obvious to everyone probably watching this. But it was so sick and insidious how they forced it on people. And I don't know the long term consequences. I don't know if you guys have seen Died Suddenly. It's on, what's that, Rumble. It's an interesting, um, it's an interesting documentary. And you do see a lot of crazy stuff on the news, like people who are normally healthy die of a heart attack. I've seen that in my own family. So I don't know. I don't know what the long term. Nobody does know the long term consequence. That's a fact. Does it cause blood clots? We also don't know. Do they care to find out? It seems like they don't. Really frustrating. As far as World War II, I had to say no to an order like that when the guy giving the order had a gun to your head, even if it's just inferred. Yeah, um, it's in a wartime environment. There's kind of like this battlefield ethic. Like if you're a bad leader on the battlefield, people kind of take matters into their own hands to some degree. Like, I'm not following your orders. What are you going to do? Um, but it's this. Uh, I've always likened like bad culture, like the culture of the military, was good for a very long time. I've been in for 15 years. The last 2 years or so, it it's it seems like a shut up in color. Kind of like there's no pushback from anybody, like down the ranks. And then we had Afghanistan. I've been there twice, and yeah, it was very frustrating because most people who were ever in Afghanistan could told you we didn't know why we were there, but we were told that we were kind of like spreading democracy, training these people up, and we were like, what? Um, like, okay, if that's the case, we'll be here for 150 years. Um, so I guess that's what we're doing. And then all that, all the people there knew um, it either had to last forever or we should have pulled out a long time ago. The real question is, if we didn't have fiat money, how long that would that war have lasted? 2, 3 years, maybe. If it was coming out of your paycheck to fund a war, I don't think people would be down for that. That's true, Hobo, but you got to pick a side at some point, even if it cost you everything. I agree with you, and hopefully, it's getting there. I think in the NDAA that was just signed, the National Defense Authorization Act, they cut the vaccine mandate for the military. Um, and in that documentary, by the way, there's a military doctor specifically like, hey, this is actually hampering readiness, meaning troops ready for deployment, because we're seeing more injuries, whether it's tied to vaccine or not, we don't know. But since the vaccine, we've seen more injuries. So, and, despite the facts, people keep pushing it. What's your opinion about XRP and Ripple? How come Ripple and XRP, including in the ISO, what does ISO mean again? Can't remember, 2022, if they haven't settled if it's a security or not. Now, so I've looked into Ripple, and they have a CEO, right? They have representation. Same thing with Ethereum. Ethereum just changed from proof of work to proof of stake. And I don't know if XRP is proof of work, but if it has a CEO, it is centrally controlled. It is Fiat 2.0, in my humble opinion. Now, you might be able to change my mind because I haven't totally looked into XRP. I know what it is and all that. I know they have a CEO. I know they've been in a court or litigation with the SEC. But unique, again, to Bitcoin is the fact that it is decentralized. There is no CEO. and that's the unique probability or possibility, I think, of having money outside the system, because all these other cryptocurrencies, they have an initial coin offering, and my question is, what are you selling? Is it a technology? So are you selling a token kind of as a equity in the tech? But Bitcoin is trying to solve the money problem. And you only need one solution to that. You could have multiple, but if it has a CEO, you should really question how what the legitimacy of it is. It doesn't I'm not saying it's legitimate technology, but are they trying to create a money? That's the question I would ask. Hopefully that helped. I'm a big fan of mineable or open source crypto. I'm just trying to figure out if this recession depression takes down exchanges, Tether, stablecoins. How can we get Bitcoin by exchanging dollars? Yeah, yeah. I think. Well, I buy my Bitcoin on Swan. I tried a bunch of exchanges, and to be honest, I have only been into Bitcoin. I knew what it was, but I've only been into Bitcoin since 2020 because if you've watched me for a little bit, my light bulb moment was the stock market going up and to the right, and no one was working. I was like, what in the world is going on? And started looking into the debt, yada yada. And then I looked into Bitcoin, and uh, the more I look into it, the more I'm convinced that it could be a very awesome solution. And for sure, it is a very cool technology that is better than the fiat system and not controlled by anybody. And if you follow the Bitcoin community, they're pretty awesome people, well learned, yada yada. I'm not saying it's 100%, but what do you think the Fed's going to do? 50 or 75? Well, everyone that says, well, we're betting it's 50 or 75 in the all the newspapers and stuff, they've been right because I think it's leaked all the time. So I think it's going to be 50. Um, we'll see. I have, and I call that side light and good watches over by God. Oh yes, are you talking about the military? Yeah, one of Canada's federal Liberal politicians died suddenly today. There's going to be a critical mass of pissed off parents. I'd be upping security at hospitals and such places. Yeah, because the I tell people that our system is, you don't know, or you don't think of it cognitively. At least I didn't before. But our entire system is based off of trust, right? The medical system. And what happens when a large majority of the population doesn't trust you anymore? When you are the trusted source, whether it be military, medical, finances, politicians, what have you. And what happens when that reaches a critical mass? In fiat currency, that means hyperinflation. What does it mean societally? Unfortunately, it could mean violence. Because if you are advocating something, really think about this. You're advocating something that actually hurts somebody, um, and you are shaming them if they don't do it. Vaccine would be one, and it ends up hurting people. That would cause the kind of societal unrest that we would not want to see. Um, that's why you don't just trust somebody. That's why free speech matters and debate matters. It's just all that went by the wayside. Amen as well. I agree with you, Hobo. Check out what coins both Swift and might have more future in the years to come. Because ISO 2022. Oh, the new CBDC. Some people think the CBDC, yeah, like you said, is going to be XRP. That's why this SEC thing is going on. Um, the question I always ask is, they have to revalue the debt. A CBDC will only help if they can implement more control, meaning they cannot control inflation right now unless they destroy the economy. Now, maybe they could control inflation if they can say, hey, you can't buy this, you can't buy this dollar expires, you only get this much fiat. Um, that's the only benefit if you're looking at it from like a totalitarian's point of view. Like that's what a CBDC, how it would help them lower inflation. But a CBDC issued by the Fed doesn't help banks because where's money created today? Banks, right? So that would mean banks are useless, commercial banks. So there's going to be a lot of pushback from that, and it's interesting actually what Jerome Powell has said to like Christine Lagarde and stuff in regards to CBDC. Um, but bottom line, a CBDC is the exact same thing we have today, just with more power and control. That's the only way a central bank digital currency helps get us out of the scenario we're in today. Or we revalue all the debt. So we issue all these CBDCs and we say, hey, one CBDC is worth $10 from the past, whatever it is. Like they revalued gold back in the day. Who knows? But I do know this. If it has the potential for authoritarians to distort it, they will every time. And yeah, it's kind of an authoritarian's wet dream. If it isn't metals, it's fiat. Um, yeah, the only thing I would caveat that with is maybe Bitcoin. But like I said, Bitcoin has that added benefit of hey, you can buy a cup of coffee with it. Try buying a cup of coffee with gold. It's very difficult, and that's why gold eventually leads to some kind of centralized control because it's not really transportable and it's not divisible either. Okay, so 451 mentioned this earlier. Immune thrombocytopenia is a drastic drop in platelets. There was two other parents that kids had it, two COVID vax, and my son flu. Used to be one in 400K kids, three in the building of 600 kids. Yeah, there's a lot of suspect things. And if you want the truth, the best place for the truth in like excess death, unfortunately, is life insurance companies because they run these actuarial tables and they go, well, this is the likelihood of dying from this to this to this. This person's unhealthy here. And that's what I've been reading into, and they have noticed a higher rate of uh, people dying of heart attack, brain aneurysm, all kinds of things. And again, no matter what your view on the vaccine is, nobody knows the long term consequences. Nobody. Thank you, Avi. Appreciate you coming on the live stream. Mineable coins have the same intrinsic problem as the Fed. The more you make, the less it's worth. Yes, I would say that to some degree. Bitcoin has a max cap of 21 million. And if you're a Bitcoin skeptic, I don't try to say, hey, you know what? There's this magic internet money. I just encourage people to look into it and go down the rabbit hole, as people say, and read about why people like it. Because there's very smart people who are into Bitcoin, very smart economists, and it is a unique technology that hasn't existed before. So, something to think about. Outside Bitcoin, check Ravencoin. They're expecting it to overtake ETH as the number 2 mineable coin since ETH went proof of stake. I have to check it out. And I do say to anyone, people can mimic Bitcoin. That's the interesting thing. Like it's open source code. People can mimic it. And let's say Ravencoin is, I don't know what it is, but it sounds like proof of work. Um, Bitcoin is useless if people don't want to use it. Um, Except people do want to use it. The network effects are growing. A lot more people like it or seeing what it does, yada yada. So somebody tomorrow could come out with Bitcoin 2.0. But there's a lot of reasons why Bitcoin, the first Bitcoin, the one we all know, is unique. And Ravencoin may be something, but proof of work, if you're trying to solve the money problem, proof of work is mandatory in my opinion. Old buddy Gregory, it's an old buddy from the military. Do you think Sam Bankman-Fried being arrested and the falling of FTX will cause other institutions to collapse or go bankrupt from the bogus derivatives? Contagion effect, if you will. Um, yeah. Uh, you know what's so crazy? The last 2 years, like if you look into what a derivative is, like the whole financial system, as Henry Ford once said, people understood banking, there would be a riot in the streets tomorrow. And the derivatives, you're like, what is going on? This seems illegal. And they're like, no, totally legal. We've been doing it for years. And we just print money and these derivatives out of thin air. So that's what happened in '08 in the housing market crash. Problem is, we don't have the Fed to back us in the crypto market. So there's been a lot of Binance specifically has said some has done some suspect things, kind of running the same playbook as Sam Bankman-Fried. So to answer your question, yes, I think there will be more contagion. But what helps me sleep at night? I buy Bitcoin on Swan Bitcoin. I put it in cold storage, and I don't worry about any of the other cryptos. I just don't. Um, I tried other like Voyager, who went out of business. I've tried quite a few, and they often preach some kind of proprietary yield, like how they get the yield on a stable coin, which is essentially a dollar. And I've learned my lesson on that, and that makes me suspect. So yes, I think there'll be more contagion. Um, where I don't know. Sometimes these things take years to play out, but I think it's 3.5 billion of Bitcoin taken off of Binance last couple of days. And here's the other thing about the Bitcoin price. I think it was 1.5 billion of paper Bitcoin, aka a derivative, was on FTX. There weren't even you bought a Bitcoin and they essentially, unbeknownst to you, had an IOU for you. Yeah, crypto not regulated. I think we're in one final thing. I think we have the worst of both worlds because people see Sam Bankman-Fried meeting with the SEC and they think, oh, there's some kind of legitimacy to this, and that gives them even um, more chutzpah to invest in a company like FTX, which they would be a lot more cautious if they knew, hey, this is Wild West. They could take all your money. They would want to measure twice, cut once. Jose, what's up? Sup, Eric? How big was your Nobody Special bump? About 300 subs. Congrats. Yes, thank you. He's awesome. Um, Met him in Denver. Great dude. I had about 200, about 1,000 hours away from being monetized. But to be honest, I started this channel for cathartic reasons because my brain was going to explode, keeping it all inside, and having these kind of conversations, meeting like-minded people. Um, I don't know, helps me to sleep because half the time I feel like you're taking crazy pills. Like, is the world about to fall apart? And people are just be bopping around, watching NFL, doing whatever. You're like, jeez. Anyways, so yeah, appreciate it. GPU mineable proof of work coin. It has a cap of 21 billion, similar to Bitcoin. I mined and sold around the top. Added a lot of silver from it. I keep moving the money. Yeah, I I don't. I try not to. I try to keep it simple. Um, I don't mine Bitcoin. I've thought about running a node, but like I said, I just dollar cost average and then put it in cold storage. And I haven't gotten into any other cryptos, but that's not to say I won't. But um, yeah, it's just my take. I'm buying the gear to melt big metal to little metal. That might be useful trade service in the future. Everybody needs their aluminum smaller. Yeah, it's not a bad idea. If we're thinking like if people really think it's going to be like apocalyptic, which I don't know, I don't necessarily think that, but definitely a possibility. Gold is kind of useless in that kind of environment. Um, Bullets are like way more tradable than gold. Um, but we'll see. My big like thing I'm thinking about that hasn't happened in history before is the fact that all Western countries are in the same boat. So normally when you see hyperinflation, it's isolated to one country, but all these Western countries, much like Marty was talking about, he said contagion. That same thing exists within countries because they all have debt together and they're relying on each other's supply chains. Yeah, so I mean that could fall apart too. And my base case, what I'm guessing is going to happen is I don't know for sure, but you're going to see uh, smaller countries fail. If you look at what's going on in Peru, you look at Sri Lanka, you look at these countries that are poorer and therefore don't have a lot of wiggle room when it comes to dollar based debt, and they have to settle things like energy in the dollar. They're going to fail first. You're going to see massive social unrest, and we'll see how Europe makes it through the winter. But just if they make it through the winter, that doesn't matter. Where's the energy coming from next winter? So I think it'll progressively get worse. America will be the last one standing because people will start going into the dollar. Because as their currency inflates faster than the dollar, um, they'll look for a safe haven. Traditionally, that's been the dollar. 1,000 hours to monetization. I'll fire up the spare computer and put your channel on repeat. Hey, I appreciate it. All right. I wonder some days if there could be 5 to 10 POW proof of work coins base of Bitcoin into like 4x. It would solve some of the issues with Bitcoin. Yeah, potentially. Jose, do you think uh, do you think about the future automation of lots of work? Automated semis, Tesla bots. Yeah, I do actually. Um, and scarcity. Like first rule of economics is scarcity. And so if we live in a world, a deflationary world, and I read a book by Jeff Booth called The Price of Tomorrow. And in that world that you're describing, some people think it's, you know, horrifically bad. There's like one job and 10 people who want it. That's potential. Or it could be a massively deflationary world where everything's almost free because everything is very inexpensive. Now, to give you guys a little bit of hope, I read about, and I'm no energy expert, but I read about this new breakthrough in nuclear fusion that they've been working on for like 50 years. Google that. And peak cheap energy will be the next boom in any economy because energy is what makes the world go round. And automation, I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. But what I always ask people to get kind of the conversation going, who people don't think about this, is, hey, if we're in a capitalist system where we're supposed to give capitalism gives you better products for cheaper, why is everything more expensive? And that's because we're not in a capitalist system. It's not deflationary. Everything's inflationary. It gets harder and harder to afford your standard of living. Um, so yes, there could be automation, but it doesn't always mean a bad thing. It could mean you work 20 hours a week and you can afford basic standard of living, food, shelter, yada yada. Which I think would be a cool future. But energy is paramount to that being successful. I checked in daily. It's the weird listening to you on 1x speed, lol. Why do you say that? All right. Any more questions, guys? Been going for like 49 minutes. Oh, got another one here. Water filtration. Drop a silver coin in your water storage and it will be microbe free. I think it's worth for 5 gallons. Yeah. No, so there, yes, there are uses. I assume you're talking about, hey, what's more useful, gold or silver or bullets? Yes, there are uses to it, for sure. But if we're talking monetary metals, right, or you're thinking monetary value in a world of the world's gone amok and everyone's gone crazy, I don't know. I don't think people would care if they're starving if you had tons of gold. This is my 2 cents. All right, folks. I appreciate the turnout tonight. Love talking to you guys. Um, anyways, um, yeah, 2 ounces. Love it. I appreciate you guys coming on tonight. Thank you for watching. Thanks for listening. I got a couple more uh, cool stories coming out that I've been working on this week. But I appreciate you guys supporting me, and it's awfully fun talking amongst people who think alike, and gets me to think outside the box. All right, guys. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.